Hey guys, how's it going? This is Watch, and in this video we'll be doing a direct head-to-head hands-on comparison between the Sony Xperia Z3 and the iPhone 6 Plus. So maybe you're perhaps interested in seeing how one phone does over the other, or even thinking about getting one of these phones. This video should give you a good understanding of which one should work best for you. Now, the first thing that we're going to take a look at is the overall physical dimensions and design differences between these two smartphones. Looking at the iPhone 6 Plus, it measures about 158.1 millimeters in terms of height and about 77.8 millimeters in terms of its width. Now, the Sony Xperia Z3 is certainly a little bit smaller in terms of footprint, measuring about 146 millimeters in terms of height and about only 72 millimeters in terms of its width. In terms of thickness, they're actually really similar. I've never seen phones that look pretty much identical in terms of thickness. The iPhone measures 7.1 millimeters versus 7.3 on the Z3. So now in terms of weight itself, when you're holding these two phones in your hand, you can notice that the Z3 is just a tiny bit lighter, and it is measuring about 152 grams versus 172 grams on the Apple iPhone 6 Plus. Now ergonomically, the 6 Plus is a larger smartphone. It's obviously a brand new smartphone for Apple. They've never had a phablet device before. So if you do have smaller pockets and like to have your phone kind of be hidden in your pockets where nobody can really see it, obviously the 6 Plus may give you some issues. And the Z3, although it's not a small smartphone at all, it's a very similar smartphone in terms of the footprint, and the overall kind of form factor is not a huge difference. Keep in mind that the screen size on the 6 Plus is 5.5 inches versus 5.2 inches on the Z3. So basically, if you can fit the Z3, you can probably fit the 6 Plus. So there's not a lot of argument over here. Now, in terms of the construction and overall feel, the Z3 is very well made. It's not obviously made of fully aluminum like the iPhone 6 Plus is, but it certainly is rigid and feels very well built. The corners and everything like that has a very similar feel to the 6 Plus because both the front and back have a nice curved around edges. So very comfortable to hold in the hand, and gives a very similar impression. Obviously, the feel is different because the back is made out of different materials. It's not made out of aluminum, polycarbonate plastics, and a mixture of alumina on the Z3 in terms of construction. And the iPhone 6 Plus has this basic little known issue now of the whole bend gate issue. Now, in my experience, I've used the iPhone 6 Plus for almost a month now and never had that kind of issue. And even if I try to physically bend the phone, I really have to put a lot of intense force, something that it would not come across in everyday usage, to actually get the phone to bend. Every phone will essentially bend and break if you apply enough force to it. That's just plain physics. But in terms of the overall construction, I think the 6 Plus is still a very well-made smartphone. It's up there with one of the highest spec and most premium looking smartphones out there. So it certainly deserves to be called an iPhone in that regard. Now, durability wise, the Z3 has a couple of features over the 6 Plus, mainly because it's IP68 certified for dust and water resistant up to 1 meter down and 30 minutes in. So you can basically drop this thing in water, not have to worry about frying the phone at all. It is certified for that. The iPhone 6 Plus, on the other hand, if you do drop it in water, well, most likely it's probably going to have some issues on you. Now, you might be able to revive it after, but it definitely doesn't have any of that certification. So definitely not as durable as the Sony Xperia Z3. Moving on to the displays themselves, this is where it gets kind of interesting because both of them have the same exact resolution of 1920 by 1080, but they obviously, because of their different screen sizes, they have a different PPI count, 401 on the 6 Plus and 424 on the Z3. They also have LED backlit technology, and both can reproduce 16 million colors. Now, in real life, I haven't seen two displays that really match up to each other so nicely. I think in terms of overall physical and viewing experience, they're really quite identical, in fact. Now, Sony has a couple of different tricks up its sleeve in terms of signal processing technology. They're using its triluminous display technology as well as the X Reality engine for video and photo processing. It's usually technology that they use for their televisions, incorporated into their smartphones. It basically modifies the image to make it look more vibrant and more contrasting, more saturated colors. And it definitely does a good job in terms of color reproduction and overall vibrancy. But really, there's not a big advantage over here. I don't think one phone has a better display over the other. They're really quite solid. Now, one thing I do like about the iPhone 6 Plus is that it has a new polarizing filter on top of the glass. So if you go outside in brightly lit conditions, the phone looks very vibrant and very usable at even lower brightnesses. So something that most smartphones definitely can't claim to do. Furthermore, looking at the internal specifications, both are pretty modestly powered. Now, the Sony Xperia Z3 is not using the latest generation of Snapdragon processor, so it's not as fast as the current Note 4 because it's using the 801 chip instead of the 805 chip. Now, it is still a dual-core processor. It's clocked at about 2.5 gigahertz, and the Apple iPhone 6 Plus is using their brand new A8 dual-core processor that's clocked at about 1.4 gigahertz, and it's one of the fastest processors out there, even though it's dual core, and it's certainly a very well engineered. Basically, Apple has really done their homework in designing a CPU architecture that can really go up ahead and beat out even the top tier Android smartphones out there. However, one big thing that the 6 Plus is lacking is RAM. We have 3 times the amount of RAM on the Z3, 3 gigs versus 1 gig on the iPhone 6 Plus. So let's go ahead and take a look at some real world benchmarks and see how these two processors compare against each other. Now, taking a look at the results that we got on Geekbench 3, you can see that the Z3 is definitely performing nicely, kind of matching the overall capabilities of the iPhone 6 Plus in terms of the multi-core capabilities. But in terms of the single-core score, you could definitely see that we have a higher score, about 1,416 on the 6 Plus and about 968 on the Z3. So the Z3 is definitely a comparable phone in terms of overall performance, but there are scenarios where the iPhone 6 Plus is faster. Now let's talk about some of my unique features that I like about each phone. One big thing that I do like about the iPhone 6 Plus is that it has a fingerprint sensor. It's one of the best scanners out there right now. The Touch ID system works fantastically. You can use it to unlock your phone, use it in a different orientation, and you can use it with a whole bunch of different apps as well. Additionally, because of its larger size, if you double tap on the home button, you get one-handed operation mode, which drops down the top portion of your screen so you can easily access it with one thumb, and that's certainly handy. Unfortunately, it doesn't do anything for the width of the phone, but it is easier to reach the top portions of the phone. Now, obviously, in terms of OS, we can go into a whole bunch of details between the differences of Android versus iOS. Now, keep in mind that the Sony Xperia Z3 is using a skin running on top of Android 4.4.4, so it's not a pure Android experience, what you would expect from, let's say, a Nexus device. Now, in terms of the overall skin itself, it's very well designed. It's not as obtrusive and as hard to use as some of the other skins out there. So in terms for new users, it's definitely easier to use. But there's nothing like iOS right now in terms of usability. It really depends upon what you prefer. But I think in terms of friendliness and the way it's designed, you can really pick up any iPhone, and it's really second nature in terms of usability. That's one of the big highlights and one of the successes of the iPhone lineup, and certainly what iOS has done. Now, in terms of iOS 8 and new features, there's a whole bunch of new features, but they're really quite incremental. It's not as big as what we found last year with iOS 7, which was certainly a completely different OS. But there's definitely some handy features out there that we can discuss in more detail if you take a look at my full review on the iPhone 6 Plus. Now, one thing I do have to mention is that the iPhone 6 Plus has a better than average external speaker, but the new speaker on the Z3 is a stereo system that's front facing, and it has an excellent signal reproduction in terms of lows and highs. So let's go ahead and take a look at the differences between the external speaker to see which one sounds best. Now, in terms of connectivity, both are internationally available phones. They can run the latest generation of LTE bandwidths all around the world if you get the unlocked versions. Both have the smaller form factor nano SIM, so you're going to need a nano SIM to make it run with your network. And in terms of Wi-Fi capabilities, they both have AC dual band compatibilities with NFC capabilities as well as Bluetooth 4.0. Now, the key thing over here is the NFC on the iPhone 6 Plus is Apple Pay compatible. So it's a little bit less universal than the NFC that we find on the Z3, but one of the cool things that Apple will be unveiling soon enough and releasing all out through the world, hopefully, is a system where you can eliminate your wallet and put credit card information on the iPhone and go through different stores and things like that and actually use the NFC chip to pay for your purchases. Now, this is certainly not available right now. I live in Canada. None of the retailers are supporting it currently, but we will have that soon enough. Now, interestingly, the Sony Xperia Z3 is an Android smartphone, so you can use a very similar service from Google's perspective, which is the Google Wallet. Now, moving forward, one of the killer features that every smartphone has to have is an excellent camera. And both of these certainly have excellent cameras in both regards. When we're taking a look at the front-facing camera, you can definitely see that the Sony Xperia Z3 has a higher resolution camera. It has a 2.2 megapixel camera that can do 30 frames per second 1080p video versus the 1.2 megapixel camera with the 720p video at 30 frames per second that's been in the iPhone for a couple of generations now. And certainly if you're going to do a lot of video conferencing and selfies, the Z3 definitely has that better camera, both in terms of field of view and resolution. And when we take a look at the other side, the rear-facing camera, it's kind of a completely different architecture. The way that Sony is going about making a rear-facing camera and the way Apple is going to make a rear-facing camera. On the Apple side, we have an 8 megapixel stills camera that has optical stabilization, so really excellent for shooting in low light, and it's going to get you smoother video. One of the best optical stabilization implementations on a smartphone right now. It also has LED flash. Now, the Sony Xperia Z3 has a 20.7 megapixel sensor, which is an absolutely incredible resolution, kind of mind-blowing. It also has LED flash, and Sony has their own software-based stabilization, which does a good job of keeping your photos pretty still and your videos pretty smooth, which we'll take a look at a side-by-side comparison. Now, in terms of video, the Sony Xperia Z3 has possibly one of the best video cameras out right now. It can do 4K at 30 frames per second, and it could do slow motion in 120 frames per second at 720p. However, one big feature that the iPhone 6 has over the Z3 is that it can do 720p at 240 frames per second, making the iPhone 6 Plus one of the best slow motion cameras in a smartphone right now, period. So let's go ahead and take a look at the image quality between these two smartphones to see which one looks best to you. Now, the last thing that we're going to talk about is the battery performance. Now, the iPhone 6 Plus has a fairly large battery. It has a large chassis to hold a much larger battery than previous generation smartphones. The battery capacity is 2915 milliamp hours versus 3100 milliamp hours on the Sony Xperia Z3. Now, in terms of most circumstances, the iPhone 6 Plus delivers excellent battery performance at least a day to a day and a half, and sometimes even 2 days if you're really kind of conservative with your battery performance. The Z3, on the other hand, is one of the highest performing smartphones in terms of battery. It has a new endurance mode where it can basically be as efficient as possible, underclock the CPU, and you can really easily manage 2 days. Now, my user experience is that I use my phones pretty consistently, at least every 5 minutes. I'm not on it 24/7 on the other hand, though. video, but I basically check my messages and social media and browse through the web on a fairly consistent basis, and I watch a couple of YouTube videos here and there. So I'm not the most heaviest user, but I'm definitely a user that uses their phone pretty consistently. Unfortunately, there are no user replaceable batteries on either of these phones, but that's not really a big deal since you're not going to really struggle to get through the day on one charge. But other than that, guys, that's really it. If you have any specific questions about anything I talked about, please make sure to leave that on a comment down below. Make sure to give us a thumbs up. That helps us out tremendously. And subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. We have a whole bunch of comparisons that are out right now. So if you're really interested in all the top tier smartphones that are out right now, definitely check back to the channel. It has a lot of resources for you. Thank you so much again for watching. We'll see you later. Take care.